Captain Alex Monroe stood on the deck of the Starfire, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space through the viewing window. He had always admired the quiet beauty of the stars, their distant glow like little jewels scattered across the dark canvas. Life in the colonies had always been peaceful, distant from the chaos of intergalactic politics. He and his crew had just finished a routine patrol when the alert sounded. At first, it seemed like just another false alarm, but Alex could feel the change in the air. Something was different. Suddenly, the warning systems blared louder, shaking the ship. The massive Zixar Empire fleet appeared from nowhere, massive ships looming like predators ready to strike. Alex's hands tightened around the control panel. The enemy had arrived. Without warning, the Zixar ships fired. Blinding beams of energy cut through the Starfire's shields, ripping through the hull. The ship shuddered violently as alarms echoed through the command center. Alex gritted his teeth, issuing commands to his crew. Activate evasive maneuvers. Return fire, he ordered, but the attacks were too swift, too powerful. The Starfire was outmatched, and it wasn't long before the ship's systems began to fail one by one. "Sir, we can't hold them off much longer," shouted Lieutenant Harris, his voice tight with fear. Alex's gaze hardened. He refused to let his crew panic, but he could feel the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "Prepare to abandon ship," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The crew scrambled, moving quickly to the escape pods. Alex, however, knew there wasn't much hope left. The Zixar forces had overwhelmed them. Moments later, everything went dark. When Alex woke, his head pounded. His vision was blurry, and his body felt stiff. As he struggled to sit up, he realized he was no longer aboard the Starfire. The walls around him were sleek, dark metal, and the air was thick with a strange, unfamiliar smell. He looked around, trying to make sense of where he was, but before he could gather his bearings, a door slid open. A tall figure entered the room, its movements fluid and graceful. Alex tensed, instinctively preparing for a fight. The figure, an alien of imposing stature, stood in front of him. Its skin was a deep shade of purple, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through him. This was no ordinary alien. This was the Zixar Empire. "You are a human," the figure said, its voice cool and disinterested. "I have heard of your kind, but never encountered one. How intriguing." Alex stayed silent, trying to hide the fear creeping into his chest. The alien's gaze felt heavy, almost predatory. He knew he was in the heart of the enemy ship. He was a prisoner now, and his fate was in the hands of the Zixar Empire. The figure stepped closer, eyes narrowing as it studied him. "You will come with me," it said. Alex had no choice but to follow, but in the back of his mind, something told him this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything he knew about himself and about the galaxy. Alex was led through the dark, metal corridors of the Zixar ship. The walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, the air thick with the scent of unfamiliar technology. He had been captured, taken from his crew, taken from his ship. Every step he took felt heavier, as if the weight of his situation was growing with each passing moment. His captor, the tall purple alien, led him without speaking. Alex tried to keep his composure, but every instinct in him screamed to fight, to escape, to survive. But what good would that do? He had no idea where he was or how to get out. He had to rely on his mind, on his training, on the hope that his people were still out there, planning a rescue. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber. It was grand, its ceiling so high that it seemed to vanish into the shadows above. The air here was different, less suffocating, as though the ship's command center was ahead. And at the center of the room, standing tall and regal, was a figure that could only be described as queenly. Her presence filled the room, every inch of her radiating power and authority. This was the Queen Zarethis, ruler of the Zixar Empire. She was magnificent. Her skin shimmered with a dark, metallic hue, and her eyes, glowing a fierce red, locked onto Alex with an unsettling intensity. She did not move, yet it felt as if the very air around her vibrated with energy. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was the being who commanded an empire that had crushed countless worlds. This was the ruler of the army that had attacked his colony. Zarethis took a step toward him, her eyes never leaving his face. "You are human," she said, her voice low and commanding. "I have heard many things about your kind. Many of your species have been encountered by my forces, but none have shown any ability to truly withstand us." Alex stood tall, refusing to cower, even as his insides twisted in fear. "I'm not like most humans," he said, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline in his veins. "You'll learn that soon enough." The Queen's gaze narrowed, her lips curling into a faint smile, though it was far from warm. "You are bold. This will be interesting." Zarethis studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Alex felt like he was under a microscope, every inch of him analyzed, picked apart. His every move, every breath, was being scrutinized. After a long silence, the Queen turned to the tall alien who had brought Alex here. "Leave us," she commanded. The alien bowed low before retreating from the room, leaving Alex alone with the Queen. Zarethis stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost hypnotic. "Tell me, human, what makes you so different?" she asked, her tone almost curious. "Why do you refuse to bow, to submit, like the others?" Alex swallowed but held her gaze. "We don't kneel easily," he said simply. "And you'll learn that humans aren't as easy to break as you think." For the first time, a flicker of something resembling emotion crossed Zarathis's face, a brief flash of unease. But it was gone before Alex could fully register it. "Perhaps," she murmured, almost to herself, "perhaps you are more than just a curiosity." Alex's heart raced, but he stood firm, uncertain of what her words meant. One thing was clear: he wasn't just a prisoner. He was a challenge. And Queen Zarethis seemed to be very interested in what humans could truly offer. Alex spent the next few days confined to a small, sterile cell on the Zixar flagship. The ship was a massive, floating fortress of sleek metal and advanced technology. It was hard to get used to the quiet hum of the ship, the eerie silence that filled the air when no one was speaking. The walls around him seemed alive, pulsating with an energy he couldn't understand. He had no idea what was coming next. Queen Zarethis hadn't spoken to him since their encounter in her chamber, but he could feel her presence lingering in the back of his mind, like a shadow watching him from afar. She had been intrigued by him, and that intrigued him in turn. What was it about humans that fascinated her? Was it his defiance, or something else? He couldn't quite figure it out, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to sit here and wait to be crushed by the mighty empire. One day, after what felt like an eternity of silence, the door to his cell slid open. A tall, armored guard entered, his face covered by a helmet. He didn't speak but motioned for Alex to follow. With little choice, Alex stood and moved to the door. His mind raced, but he kept his composure. Whatever was coming next, he had to be ready. The guard led him through the dark corridors again, the same cold, metallic walls stretching endlessly on either side. As they moved deeper into the ship, Alex couldn't help but notice the occasional alien species walking by. Some Zixar, others who appeared to be conquered races, their eyes downcast, their shoulders hunched in fear. It was clear to him now that the Zixar Empire was more than just a powerful military force. It was a vast empire built on fear and control, one that had swallowed countless worlds and species in its pursuit of power. Finally, they arrived at a large, dimly lit room. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air smelled faintly of something metallic. At the center of the room stood a large screen, displaying maps of various planets and star systems. It was a command center, and Alex was brought in front of it. "Stand here," the guard ordered, his voice low and mechanical. Alex obeyed, his mind racing as he looked at the screen. The maps on display were of the galaxy, planets, star systems, and areas marked with the insignia of the Zixar Empire. It was a picture of dominance, of power beyond anything he had ever seen. And in the center of it all was Queen Zerethis, her face glowing on a separate screen. Human. Zerethis' voice crackled through the speakers, strong and commanding. You are here to learn about the strength of my empire. You will see the truth behind our power. Alex clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. I'm here because you've taken me. But I won't just stand by and watch. Zerethis' image seemed to smile, though there was no warmth in it. We have conquered many worlds. Yours was just another in a long line. What makes you think you can change that? She paused, and Alex could almost feel her eyes on him, studying him. You, a mere human, are nothing compared to the forces we control. But perhaps you will be useful. You'll learn how we rule this galaxy, and you will understand the might of the Zixar Empire. Alex's eyes narrowed. He wasn't afraid of her, but the more he learned about this empire, the more he understood the true scale of what he was up against. This wasn't just an alien force. It was a machine built for control, built to crush anything that stood in its way. And right now, it was crushing everything Alex had known. But one thing was clear to him. Humans were not like other species. They didn't bow to fear, and they didn't give up. I'll never accept your empire, Alex said, his voice steady and firm. Zerethis' image flickered for a moment, and a dark smile tugged at her lips. We shall see, human. We shall see. Alex had spent days in the cold, metallic hallways of the Zixar flagship, moving from one place to another under constant guard. Though the alien ship was full of strange technologies, there was one thing Alex couldn't ignore: the overwhelming presence of Queen Zerethis. Her power was something beyond his understanding, something he could feel even when she wasn't near. It was as if the very air in the ship had a weight to it, a weight that came from her. One evening, after a long day of being questioned and examined by her scientists, Alex was summoned to meet her once again. He had learned little in the past few days, other than how powerful and efficient the Zixar Empire was, but he hadn't learned anything that made him feel any less certain that he needed to escape, to warn his people. This time, Alex was led to a chamber unlike any he had seen before. The walls were covered in intricate designs that seemed to shimmer, alive with an unknown energy. In the center of the room stood a large raised platform, and at the top of that platform stood Queen Zerethis herself. She was even more intimidating up close, her dark eyes glowing with a subtle, unnerving light. Human, she said as he entered, her voice resonating with power. You have seen the might of my empire, but you have yet to see the true strength of my will. Alex's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. What do you mean? He asked. Without answering, Queen Zerethis raised one hand. The air around her seemed to bend, a strange force rippling through the room. Alex watched in awe as objects around them began to float. Small metal parts from the walls, tools, even dust. They all moved as if controlled by an unseen hand. Then, without warning, Zerethis clenched her fist. The floating objects jerked forward, slamming into the wall with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the chamber, and Alex flinched. But it wasn't the noise that bothered him. It was the raw, unrestrained power that had caused it. Zerethis turned her eyes to him, sensing his shock. Do you understand now? She asked, her tone cold. I am not just a queen. I am a force of nature. The Zixar Empire is strong because of me, and no one can stand against the power I wield. Alex swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. I've seen power like that before. It's nothing new. Zerethis tilted her head slightly, as though she hadn't expected him to speak with such confidence. You speak bravely, human, but bravery alone will not save you. I'm not afraid of you, Alex said, locking eyes with her. You think your power makes you untouchable, but it doesn't. Power doesn't last forever. A brief flicker of emotion passed across Zerethis' face. Was it doubt? For just a moment, she seemed less certain, less in control. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same cold, calculating gaze. "Perhaps you are right," she murmured, her voice quieter now, almost thoughtful. "Perhaps the strength of an empire isn't enough. But I have something far greater than power, human." "What's that?" Alex asked, genuinely curious now. "The will to reshape everything," she answered. "And that, human, is what makes the Zixar Empire unstoppable." As she spoke, Alex felt a strange shift in the air, a weight that seemed to press down on him, as if the very room were closing in. Zarathis was indeed a force to be reckoned with, but what she didn't know was that the human spirit could be just as unyielding. Alex stood his ground, refusing to show fear. "We'll see about that." Zarathis smiled darkly, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Yes, we shall." Days passed, and Alex continued to learn more about the Zixar Empire, though not by choice. Queen Zarathis had made it clear that his presence on the ship was no mere accident. She had a plan for him, though he wasn't sure what it was. Every conversation seemed to circle around the same point: the power of the empire, the strength of its ruler, and how inevitable their victory was. But Alex wasn't interested in hearing the same threats over and over. He was growing more and more frustrated, more determined to find a way out. Then, one day, the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered as an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Alex was in his cell, pacing, when a voice echoed through the walls. "Enemy ships detected. Approaching fast," the voice said. It was calm, methodical, but Alex knew it wasn't just any routine check. This was real. Moments later, a guard appeared at the door. "You're needed," he said simply, offering no explanation. Alex followed without protest. This was it. Something was happening, and he had to see what it was. He was led to a large command center, where Zarathis stood in front of a massive, glowing screen displaying a star map. The screen showed several ships closing in on their location, marked in red. The tension in the room was palpable. "An enemy fleet," Zarathis said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed a hint of something. "Worry. We've been anticipating this for some time. They've made their move sooner than expected." Alex studied the map. The ships weren't just any rebels or outlaws. They were organized, coordinated. The Zixar Empire had enemies, and those enemies had come to fight. Zarathis turned to face him. "You will help me," she said, as though it were already decided. "You will lead my forces in the defense of this ship." Alex blinked in surprise. "What? You want me to fight for you?" Zarathis didn't respond to the question. Instead, she motioned to the large console where military tactics were being mapped out. "You may be human, but your mind is sharp. You understand strategy, tactics. You will help us." Alex clenched his jaw. He didn't want to help her. He didn't want to be part of the Zixar Empire's endless conquests. But he knew something had to be done. If this enemy was a threat to the Empire, then it was a threat to everything Alex had ever known. He had to think fast. "I'll do what I can," he said, finally conceding. The battle began almost immediately. Alex found himself standing at the head of a command table, surrounded by alien officers who barely acknowledged his presence. He studied the map, his mind racing through the tactics he had learned during his years of military training. "Move our fleet into defensive formation," he ordered, his voice more confident than he felt. "Use the asteroid field to our advantage. We can trap them between us and the field." Zarathis watched him closely, her red eyes never leaving his face. "You're not as helpless as I thought." As the battle raged on, Alex's strategies began to make a difference. The Zixar ships moved with precision, using the asteroid field to their advantage as Alex had suggested. The enemy fleet was caught off guard, unable to break through the defensive lines. But the real surprise came when Alex was called to the bridge. The battle had taken a sudden turn. The enemy had launched a massive assault on the ship's main weapons array, and the damage was severe. Alex felt the tension rise again as Zerathis turned to him, her face hard and unreadable. "We are not out of danger yet," she said, her tone serious. "This battle is far from over." Alex knew they were only at the beginning of something much bigger. He had fought in battles before, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for something more. Something bigger than the Empire, bigger than even Queen Zerathis' control. And as the ship's alarms blared again, Alex knew this battle was only the first of many to come. But this time, he was ready to lead, not as a prisoner, but as a force of change. The battle was over, but the tension on the ship was far from gone. The enemy had been driven back, but their attack had shaken the Zixar Empire to its core. Queen Zerathis stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars, her expression unreadable. Alex watched her from across the room, still trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. He had helped them win, but he hadn't expected her reaction to be so calm. "Is it over?" Alex asked, stepping closer to her. Zerathis turned to face him, her red eyes scanning his face. "For now," she said simply, her voice betraying no emotion. "But this victory is nothing. The real war is still ahead." Alex nodded slowly, but something in Zerathis' voice made him uneasy. He had been on the front lines before, but this empire, this machine of war, was something entirely different. It had endless resources, an army that would stop at nothing, and a queen who was more powerful than anything Alex had ever faced. Still, despite her strength, Alex couldn't help but wonder if she had underestimated the very force that had been growing in the galaxy, the resistance against her empire. He spent the next few days in the ship's command center, working alongside the Zixar officers, studying the enemy's movements, and offering suggestions on how to deal with future threats. His influence had grown in the wake of the battle. Zerathis had begun listening to his ideas, trusting him more than she had in the past. Alex had to admit, he was starting to understand why she ruled with such power. Her mind was sharp, her leadership unquestionable. But there was something more, something hidden beneath the surface. She wasn't just a conqueror. There was a part of her that was searching for something she had yet to fully reveal. One day, while Alex was deep in conversation with one of the Zixar commanders, Zerathis entered the room. The air seemed to shift, and the conversation came to an abrupt halt. Everyone in the room stood at attention, but Alex didn't move. He had learned to stop fearing her presence, but that didn't mean he could ignore it. Zerathis' gaze fell on him. "Captain Monroe," she said, her voice cool, but there was a hint of something else in it. "You are more than just a strategist. You have become something else." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Something else?" She nodded slowly. "You have changed the course of this war. Your strategies are working. The fleet listens to you, and the Zixar Empire is not used to being challenged. But your influence goes beyond tactics. It's something deeper." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't sure what she meant, but the words hit him harder than he expected. He had come here as a prisoner, and now he was a key player in her empire's defense. The power he had gained, though unexpected, was undeniable. But as much as he hated the empire, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of responsibility. The people of the galaxy were counting on him, whether he wanted to admit it or not. "I'm not your ally, Zerathis," Alex said, his voice firm. "I'm here because I'm trying to survive. But that doesn't mean I'm on your side." Zerathis' lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't mocking. "I know," she replied quietly, "but you're becoming something I never expected, a force that even I cannot control. And that is a dangerous thing." Alex wasn't sure if that was a threat or a compliment, but he didn't care. He wasn't here to win her favor. He was here for something much bigger than that. "I'm not your weapon, Queen Zerathis," Alex said, meeting her gaze with unwavering intensity. "But I won't stand by and watch while you destroy everything in your path. I'm going to stop you, one way or another." The queen's expression hardened, but there was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, calculating thought. "We shall see, human," she said softly. "We shall see." As she turned and left the room, Alex knew one thing for certain. The war had just begun. And in this war, no one, not even the mighty Queen Zerethis, would stand unchallenged. The days after the confrontation with Queen Zerethis were tense. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. He was no longer just a prisoner on the Zixar flagship. He was a key player in their strategy, their defense, and even their internal politics. Zerethis had begun to rely on him more and more. His tactics had saved them during the battle with the enemy fleet, and now they were preparing for the next phase of the war. Yet, despite his growing influence, Alex knew that he couldn't trust the Empire. He was still a prisoner, a tool to be used by the Queen whenever it suited her. One night, while Alex was reviewing battle reports in his quarters, there was a knock at the door. He opened it cautiously, expecting one of the guards. But instead, it was a familiar face, a Zixar officer named Commander Talia. She had been one of the few who had shown some respect for him, even when others viewed him as nothing more than an outsider. "Alex," Talia whispered urgently, looking around to make sure no one was nearby. "We need to talk." Alex raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on, Talia?" Talia stepped inside quickly and closed the door behind her. "There's a plot against you," she said, her voice low. "A group of high-ranking Zixar officials are planning to eliminate you. They see you as a threat to Zerethis' power, and they don't want anyone challenging her rule, especially not a human." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected that there were factions within the Empire who didn't trust him, but hearing it from Talia made it all too real. He wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He was a target. "Why are you telling me this?" Alex asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "If they find out you warned me." "I don't want to be a part of this Empire anymore," Talia interrupted, her eyes filled with determination. "I've seen the destruction they've caused, the countless worlds they've conquered. I'm done. But I can't leave alone. I can help you escape." Alex stared at her, trying to understand. "Escape? You think I can just walk away from here? This is their flagship, Talia. You know they'll hunt me down." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "But we have an opportunity. There's a weakness in the ship's security system, one of the main power cores. It's unstable. If we sabotage it, the whole ship will go into lockdown. It'll give us the time we need to escape. But we have to act fast." Alex thought about it for a moment. The plan was risky, but it might be their only chance. If the Empire really was planning to get rid of him, he had no choice but to take it. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do it. But we need to move quickly. When do we strike?" Talia glanced around nervously. "Tomorrow night. The higher-ranking officials will be in a meeting. That's when we make our move." The next day passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. Alex could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. If they failed, it wouldn't just be his life on the line. It would be Talia's too. But he knew this was his only shot at escaping the Empire's grip. That night, as the ship's crew settled into their routines, Alex and Talia made their way to the power core. They moved swiftly, avoiding guards and using every bit of stealth they could manage. The deeper they went into the ship, the more Alex could feel the tension building. Every step brought them closer to either freedom or disaster. When they finally reached the power core, Alex's heart raced. The core was heavily guarded, but Talia had a plan. She used her access code to override the security system, allowing them entry. They had only minutes before the backup systems would kick in. Alex was about to set the charge when the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. "Someone's coming," Talia whispered urgently. "We need to move now." Alex's mind raced. This was it. They had no choice but to finish the job and get out, or risk everything. His hand shook slightly as he set the explosive device, then signaled to Talia. "Let's go," he said. They hurried back the way they came, but just as they rounded a corner, they were confronted by a group of armed Zixar soldiers. They had been waiting for them. "Traitors," one of the soldiers snarled. Alex and Talia drew their weapons, ready to fight, but they both knew the odds weren't in their favor. The betrayal had come sooner than they expected, and it wasn't just the Empire that they had to fight now. The hallway was bathed in the harsh, flickering light of the ship's emergency systems. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he and Talia backed into a corner, facing off against the group of Zixar soldiers. The sound of their boots echoed off the walls, and Alex could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. There was no way out, no way to escape without a fight. "Give up now," one of the soldiers barked, his voice harsh. "You can't win this." Alex clenched his jaw, his hand tightening around his weapon. "We're not giving up," he said, his voice steady, though his pulse raced. He glanced at Talia, who stood by his side, ready for anything. They both knew that failure wasn't an option. The soldiers moved forward, their weapons aimed directly at them. Alex and Talia fired in unison, taking down 2 soldiers before the others returned fire. The corridor erupted into chaos as energy blasts filled the air, and the sound of weapons clashing rang in their ears. "Stay close," Alex shouted to Talia, moving quickly through the chaos. But just as they were about to make a break for it, a new voice cut through the noise. "Enough." The sound of Queen Zerethis' voice echoed through the hallway, and all the fighting stopped instantly. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Zerethis, she had arrived. Zerethis appeared at the far end of the hallway, her form tall and imposing. Her eyes were glowing red, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with an unnatural energy. The soldiers immediately lowered their weapons, but their eyes remained wary, as if they weren't sure whether to attack or retreat. "Your rebellion ends here," Zerethis said, her voice cool and commanding. "There is no escape from the Zixar Empire." Alex stood tall, refusing to show fear, though his mind raced. He had thought he could escape. He had hoped that the sabotage would give him the chance to warn his people. But now, faced with the Queen herself, it seemed like everything was slipping away. "You've already lost, Zerethis," Alex said, his voice steady. "Your empire is falling apart. It's only a matter of time before the galaxy rises up against you." Zerethis studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You think I am afraid of you? Of your people?" she asked, almost amused. "You are nothing but a small spark in the grand scheme of things." But even as she spoke, Alex saw something flicker in her expression. Was it doubt? Hesitation? Before he could react, a loud explosion shook the ship. The power core, the one Alex and Talia had planted the charge on, had detonated. The ship's emergency alarms blared, and the lights flickered violently. Zerethis' face twisted in anger as the walls around them shook. "You fool," she spat, her voice laced with fury. "You've doomed us all." The soldiers around them shifted nervously, unsure of what to do next. The entire ship was in chaos, its systems failing one by one. Alex realized that the detonation had done exactly what they had hoped. It had triggered a lockdown, giving them a small window of time to escape. "Now's our chance," Talia whispered, her eyes filled with urgency. "We need to move, fast." But Zerethis was quick to react. She raised her hand, and the air around them shifted. Alex could feel the immense power radiating from her, pushing him back. The force of her will was like a wave crashing over him. "You won't escape," she warned, her voice colder than ice. "I will make sure of it." But even as she spoke, the walls began to shake more violently. The emergency systems were failing faster than they could repair them. The entire ship was coming apart at the seams. Alex knew they had no time to waste. He needed to act, and fast. With a quick motion, Alex grabbed Talia's arm and pulled her toward the nearest escape pod. The Queen's power was closing in, but they didn't have time to fight her directly. Their only chance now was to get out, before the entire ship collapsed. "Move!" Alex shouted as they sprinted toward the escape pod, the ship around them trembling with each passing second. As they reached the pod and climbed inside, the hatch slammed shut, and the pod was launched into space. Alex barely had time to breathe before they were propelled away from the dying ship. Through the small window of the pod, Alex glanced back at the Zixar flagship. It was falling apart, the once imposing ship now a crumbling wreck in the vast emptiness of space, and for the first time since he had arrived, Alex allowed himself a small breath of relief. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. Zarathis was powerful, and she wouldn't stop. But now, they had one thing on their side. The escape pod shot through space, its engines humming steadily as it left the wreckage of the Zixar flagship behind. Inside, Alex sat in silence, his mind racing. Talia was beside him, her face pale from the stress of their narrow escape, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. They had made it off the ship, but they weren't safe yet. The Zixar Empire was vast, and they were only a small spark in a much larger war. "Where do we go now?" Talia asked, her voice quiet. Alex stared out the small window of the pod. The stars seemed so far away, and the chaos of their escape felt distant, like a nightmare fading in the distance. The flagship, now a massive cloud of debris, was already drifting out of sight. "We head to the nearest rebel base," Alex said, his tone firm. "The galaxy won't be rid of Zarathis so easily. But this," he gestured back at the wreckage, "this is just the beginning." Talia nodded, her expression serious. "We've dealt the Empire a blow, but Zarathis is too powerful. She won't let this defeat stand for long." Alex knew she was right. He had seen the Queen's power firsthand. Even now he could still feel the weight of her presence, her ability to bend reality itself to her will. But Zarathis was not invincible. Her empire was crumbling, and the rebellion had gained momentum. The fire of resistance had been sparked across the galaxy, and Alex would see it through, no matter the cost. As the pod hurtled through space, they approached a nearby moon. It wasn't much, just a barren rock floating in the void, but it had become a haven for those opposed to the Zixar Empire. The rebel base was hidden in the shadow of the moon, carefully concealed from enemy scanners. "Hold on," Alex said as he began to bring the pod in for a landing. The moon's surface grew larger and more defined, and soon they were descending toward a small landing bay hidden beneath the rocky surface. The pod touched down smoothly, and Alex released the harness that held him in place. Talia did the same, and together, they climbed out of the pod and into the underground base. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. The rebels had been waiting for news, and they had gotten it. Alex's mission had been a success, at least for now. But the real fight was just beginning. The leader of the rebel base, a seasoned fighter named Commander Rook, greeted them as they entered. "Captain Monroe," Rook said, his voice gravelly, but filled with respect. "We've heard what you did. The Empire won't recover from this, but it's only the first step." Alex nodded, taking in the commander's words. "It's just the beginning. We've got to keep pushing. Zarathis won't stop. She'll be back with everything she has." Rook's face darkened. "We know. But now we have the momentum. We've got allies from every corner of the galaxy. The people are ready to rise up. The Zixar Empire has ruled through fear for too long, and now they're showing signs of weakness. This is our time." Talia stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "The rebellion needs to strike fast. We can't let Zarathis rebuild her forces. If we don't act now, we may lose everything we've gained." Alex turned to Rook. "What's the plan?" Rook studied him for a moment before nodding. "We've already identified key targets. Zixar supply lines, weapon depots, and strategic locations. We hit them hard, we disrupt their supply chain, and we weaken them further. Every victory counts. Alex felt a surge of determination. This was it. They had a plan. They had hope. But hope alone wouldn't win this war. They needed to act fast, strike hard, and keep pushing forward. "We do whatever it takes," Alex said, his voice resolute. "Zarathis may be powerful, but we've shown her that her empire isn't invincible. It's time to make her realize that her reign is over." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. The rebels knew the risks, but they also knew the importance of the mission. They had a chance, and they weren't going to waste it. As Alex looked around the room, at the faces of those who had joined the fight, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would no longer live in fear. The resistance had been ignited, and there was no turning back. The galaxy had shifted. Alex felt it deep within his bones. The quiet whispers of rebellion had turned into a loud cry for freedom, echoing through every corner of space. The Zixar Empire, once an unstoppable force, was now on the brink of collapse. And Alex, the human who had once been nothing more than a prisoner, was now at the center of the resistance, a symbol of the strength and resilience of humanity. It had been weeks since they had escaped the Zixar flagship, and now Alex stood in front of a large table in the heart of the rebel base, surrounded by commanders and strategists. Plans were being drawn up, strategies discussed. They had struck a series of devastating blows to the Zixar supply lines and key military positions, and the Empire was starting to show signs of weakness. But Zarathis was still out there, still holding on to power with all her might. "We can't stop now," Alex said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We've got them on the run, but we have to keep the pressure on. If we give them a chance to regroup, it'll be over. We have to strike fast." Commander Rook nodded, his weathered face serious. "You're right, but it won't be easy. We don't have the resources the Zixar Empire does. Every strike we make has to count." "We make it count," Alex replied firmly. "We hit them where it hurts. Their communication networks, their leadership, their control centers. We take away their ability to coordinate, and we cut off their grip on the galaxy." The room fell silent as the rebel leaders studied Alex, their eyes filled with respect. This wasn't the same man who had been brought onto their ship weeks ago. The prisoner, the outsider, the strategist, they had all seen him transform. He had become more than just a leader. He had become the embodiment of human hope in a galaxy that had long been ruled by fear. But Alex wasn't just fighting for the rebellion anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for the freedom of every world the Zixar had enslaved, for every species they had crushed under their boot. He was fighting for a future where humanity wouldn't just survive, but thrive. Talia, who had become one of Alex's closest allies, approached him as the meeting broke up. "You've changed," she said quietly, her eyes thoughtful. "When we first met, you were just trying to survive. But now you're leading a revolution." Alex sighed and looked out the window of the command room, watching the stars drift by. "I didn't ask for this, but I can't stand by and let the Zixar destroy everything. The people are ready for change. They've seen what we can do, and they won't go back to living in fear." Talia smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You've awakened something in them, and in me." Alex turned to her, his gaze softening. "We're not done yet. The hardest part is still ahead of us, but we have one thing they don't: the will to fight, and that's what will win this war." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. But Alex knew that no matter what happened, the galaxy was forever changed. The Zixar Empire, built on fear and domination, would never be the same again. Days later, the rebels launched a final, all-out assault on the heart of the Zixar Empire. Alex led the charge, his every move calculated, his mind focused on the goal ahead. The battle was fierce, the outcome uncertain, But with every blow the rebels struck, the Zixar's hold on the galaxy loosened. In the end, it was not Alex's brilliance as a strategist that brought victory, but the combined strength of countless species united under a single banner, the banner of freedom. The Zixar Empire, once a symbol of unimaginable power, collapsed. Zarathus was defeated, her empire crumbling into dust. Alex stood in the wreckage of the empire, looking out at the new dawn of the galaxy. The fight had been long and brutal, but it had been worth it. Humanity had proven itself. It had shown the universe that it would never be broken. And now, a new era was beginning, one where the people of the galaxy could finally live without fear. Alex smiled, not in triumph, but in hope. The future was theirs to shape, and together, they would build something better, something lasting.